Good evening and welcome back to Empty Cloud Monastery. My name is Bhante Sudaso and I'm here with Ayur Brahmavara and Bhante Sanata Vihari. And this is our weekly monk chat. So your opportunity to ask any questions whatsoever as long as they're related to Buddhism in some way. And there's a good chance that one or more of us will respond. We do prioritize questions over comments. So if you want to make sure that your input gets addressed, please put it in the form of a question. And hello to all the people who are checking in so far. So hello to Rick, Julie, Suzanne, Karuna, Jayanta, Richard, Mary, and John. And I see that Rick has already put in questions in advance, which is very smart. Good way to get us started. So we'll begin by paying homage to the Buddha, and then we'll start going through questions. So please type in questions, and we'll take them as they come. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammam sangham namasami. So we have some questions here, starting with Rick. It says, how do we determine what our limits should be in regards to helping other beings? I mindfully watch the strains of my limits of health, energy, and money. Due to chronic pain, exhaustion, and illness, my discernment gets impaired. So Ayabi, what do you think? How do we determine our limits?
Yeah, thank you for this. A lot of people have this sort of question, this sort of issue around, how much to be putting energy out and how much to be resourcing ourselves and taking care of ourselves. And I think, as you mentioned, Rick, chronic health issues and exhaustion, fatigue, sounds like time to draw back and to give more attention to looking after the health of this body, your mind. And, to recognize this is so important, like this is the first step. And so first step to helping, so the sense of, this is a really tricky balance. And even in monastic life, we have opportunities to really consider these things and to put out a lot of energy serving and helping sometimes. And at other times we can feel, I just don't have the juice for this. I need to spend more time meditating and take it easy and practice in a more quiet, withdrawn manner. And the great thing is that we can help each other and encourage each other to take care of ourselves. And so I think often in lay life, it's really difficult. There's so many pressures and so many responsibilities, and often no one to sort of say, oh, look, I'll do this for you. You just relax and so on. So you have to make sure to do this for ourselves and keep a real sense of watchfulness around health and energy. Make sure we get enough sleep. Make sure that we don't overstretch. And if we start to feel really tired or sick, it's a sign, I guess, that it's time to really stop and try to do as little as possible and rest as much as possible. I really wish you well with that balance.
Okay, thank you. And Richard asks, how does one stay resolute in cultivating upekkha and khanti when facing the pivotal challenge of consciously uprooting discovered defilements while steadily relinquishing until fully eradicated? Bhante Sanata, what do you think?
Yes. It doesn't really matter if it's defilements that we know about, defilements that we're just getting to know, defilements that we thought we've overcome and now they're arising again, or if it's something from the external environment, like, something bothering you from the outside or your body. Upekkha and khanti it doesn't really matter with any of those things. For me, the most important aspect has been the diligence or my commitment to cultivating these two things. So when things get difficult, I just remind myself of my commitment, my motivation, my determination to continue cultivating these states, and that keeps me going. And then if that even becomes too difficult, then I use a lot of faith-based practice in the Buddha. I remember that the Buddha was the one who praised the practice of patience and equanimity. So then when it becomes too overwhelming for me, I kind of go to refuge and find solace in the practice of the Buddha, and that kind of makes it feel warm. It gives the patience in upekkha a little warmness to it, which I think should already be there already for practicing upekkha, because upekkha should always come from the development of like metta, karuna, mudita, then we come to upekkha, and then both of these should always be combined with wisdom too, and the wisdom to discern, how to properly apply these, and when we might want to kind of do something to change the circumstances, or the wisdom to reach out to others and get suggestions and get some counseling on how to work with these. So for me, I think two things. One would be for any practice, really, kind of in general, is like the firm determination. Remember your motivation, your determination that you've made to cultivate the path and cultivate these two factors when things get difficult. And then also I like to having faith in the Buddha, and having faith in the Dhamma and the Sangha. So I would say, sada and like the determination are, I think, two things that I find very helpful.
Great, thank you. And Mary says, Bhante Sudaso, you once loved music and have given up this distraction. Could you tell us the one musician you loved when you were a layperson? No. And there's a reason for this. So I tend to believe that the kind of music that a person likes gives a very strong clue of their personality. In fact, I used to do this when I was a layperson. I would ask people what music they were into, what musicians they liked, or what genres or styles of music they liked. And from that, you can guess what the person's personality is. You can get a really good sense of their traits and their tendencies. However, if I tell you the kind of music that I used to listen to, that will give you a sense of what my personality was like 20 years ago. But that person doesn't exist anymore. They're actually quite different from the person who's here now. So it would be irrelevant. It doesn't tell you anything about Bhante Sudaso. It tells you something about a teenage person who doesn't exist and hasn't existed in 20 years. So I think it's not really helpful. So no, I will not tell you, at least not this time. It is possible to extract that information from me under particular conditions, and some people know the answer to these questions, but I don't want to share it publicly or widely. There's nothing embarrassing there. It's just for the reasons I mentioned before. And Louisa says, what is the karma of blocking people on your phone or social media? If the intention is to protect yourself from unwanted or negative contact, no bad intention, I assume there should be no bad karma. What do you think? How do you feel about blocking people?
Gosh, yeah, it's an interesting question, because I guess I'm not sure how people, I don't think they get any message about that, right? I think it's just something you can do, and they don't really know about it. It's just if they were to try and connect with you, they might not be able to. And maybe they might guess that it's because you blocked them. I mean, it's very tricky. Honestly, we have so many connections with people in these ways. I think it all becomes rather diluted. That if one person blocks us out of the thousands of people that we're connected with online, it might not make a big impact, And let's remember that karma is made through our own intention. So perhaps to simplify, you can look at your intention behind this act of blocking somebody and see, is there any greed, hatred, or delusion here that I can work with? Can I recognize if there's any defilements in the mind? Is my intention good? Do I wish them well? I think these sort of questions. But I guess the karma of blocking a person is probably not particularly potent. That's really all I can say.
And Kumo says, what is your best definition of a follower of the Buddhist teachings? Is it accepting the Four Noble Truths and following the 5 precepts at the minimum? In my opinion, maybe we could each give a short answer to this, because I actually find it interesting how this gets defined differently by different people. So of course, traditionally, a Buddhist is defined as someone who has taken the 3 refuges, refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. But then we have to talk about what we mean by refuge, if we want to take that explanation. But if somebody asked me, what's the definition of a Buddhist or the follower of a Buddhist teachings? Well, I think it actually starts with faith that the Buddha was a fully awakened being. Or at a bare minimum, faith that there is such a thing as full awakening, and it is something which can be attained by everyone. So I think that's actually the basic minimum. And further, they believe that there is a body of teachings and practices which can be done to bring one towards awakening. So this is the Dhamma. So the concept of Buddha and the concept of Dhamma are intimately connected. So Dhamma is the set of concepts and practices which bring one to awakening, to Buddhahood. And then Sangha is a bit blurry or often, but it's the idea that well, there's two approaches to this. One is the idea that again, everyone has the possibility of attaining some stage of awakening, therefore becoming a member of the noble Sangha, the Sangha of awakened beings. And the other is the idea that through community life, community practice, we can mirror each other and therefore help each other practice more effectively and make better progress. But I think that the really critical bits of being a Buddhist are these first two. So first, the belief that Buddhas exist, that they're real. And second, that there is a body of concepts and practices which bring one in the direction of awakening. I think those are the two critical things that define someone as a Buddhist. Now, given how exceptionally difficult it is to retrain the mind, whether somebody is actually doing a particularly good job of putting those teachings into practices or not, I don't actually think is a particularly valid way of judging whether somebody is Buddhist or not. But can we say they're a follower of the Buddhist teachings? I would say if somebody is actually trying, they're trying at least a little bit to follow the Dhamma at least a little bit, then yeah, I would say they're a follower of the Buddhist teachings. Doesn't mean they're perfect. They might still make a lot of mistakes. They might even do some really awful things. But it's through not following the Dhamma that they're doing awful things. And the fact that they're trying at least a little bit means that they're, again, if it's coming from this faith in Buddha and Dhamma, then I would still call them a Buddhist. I'd still call them a follower of the Buddhist teachings. Those are my thoughts anyway. Do either of you have anything else on this? Okay. So VL Hari Naidu says, the thoughts or thought processes are just words and nothing else. It's an interesting opinion. We use the words thoughts or thought processes to refer to sensations happening in the brain. Also an interesting opinion. Please explain, ? Bhante Sanata, what do you think?
I mean, this question comes with a lot of like givens already, right? Like you're taking certain things as a given already, right? It's that these things, that the way you're explaining these processes, that's the way they work. And but I think there's two ways that come to mind that we can address this issue. One is like a phenomenological way, like a subjective way of talking about thoughts and experiences in the world, and another one is a more objective, not in the sense that it's more real, but more materialistic way. And it kind of seems like you're going with the more materialistic way when you throw in the brain in there and sensations, and that thoughts are just sensations in the brain. So if we take that kind of more materialistic version, yes, we can reduce everything to just material activities, right, of atoms, and we can say that the whole subjective experience is just the firing of like chemical, electrical process that's going on throughout the whole organism, right? Not only the brain. And it is through these processes that thoughts are just kind of like an illusion, epiphenomenon that arises from this electrochemical process. Or we can take the opposite way. We can take the phenomenological subjective perspective and say that there's only experience, and thoughts not only words, but thoughts can be images, sounds, any kind of mental object becomes a thought. And within that process, I mean, we can't really talk about if there really is a brain or if there really is a world or anything. There's only subjective experiences that are divided into these different categories due to the way we're trained. Our education as we grow up, the culture that we're in, kind of models this subjective experience, and also our interactions with other experiences, how we see these different experiences combined. So I don't know, I think if you want to go more that way, you could, listen to the Uberman podcast, and he could talk to you about the neuroscience, about how the brain works, Or if you want to go a more subjective way, you can, Buddhism explains kind of sort of that way, but it's not completely an idealistic phenomenological kind of perspective to take. But Buddhism or even the existentialist philosophers kind of come at it from a subjective way. And this is a debate that's been going on since the beginning of time, If is everything just material, or is everything just ideal? If everything's just subjective in mind. And yeah, I mean, that's what comes to mind when you brought this question up.
Okay. And Mary says, can you add dinner to your prayer list? Yeah. Yeah. People are always welcome to send requests for blessings for people. We're always happy to have people to bless. And Julie says, are there any indicators that we were followers of the Buddhist teachings in a previous life? Ida B.
Interesting. Yeah. It's very interesting that, some people are, in their early infancy have the ability to do things like chant in Pali, There was a young boy in Sri Lanka who was chanting all the main suttas in Pali at a very early age. And it was quite a miraculous thing. It was as if he'd been born knowing these suttas. And he actually later on became a monk. And then he later on disrobed and got married. And then he later on became a monk again. But very amazing at the time when he was very young. Of course, this attracted a lot of attention. And it was pretty powerful, actually, I've heard recordings of him chanting. And he still has this very childish voice, and there he's chanting these incredibly lengthy suttas in Pali. So how amazing is that? Many people, have experiences in early childhood of perhaps having memories of other lives, or having sort of habits and ways of behaving that you think, well, where did that come from? And perhaps an interest in meditation at an early age may be related, who knows, to some sort of a past experience of meditation for that flow of consciousness. So I think it's actually quite an interesting field. I know a lot of research gets done into this field of early or sort of memories of past lives, or seeming memories of past lives, particularly in young children. And young children who do remember or talk about previous lives often will forget, after they reach sort of 10, 7, 8, 9, 10, they'll start to forget, and it all disappears at some point. So it's really very interesting. Maybe we come into this life carrying mental contents from previous lives that can have perhaps sometimes a really strong impression on the mind, and live on a little bit into the life, and perhaps colour, the life journey of the present life. Yeah.
Great. And Rick says, can you share some reflections on how to become more at peace with receiving help from others? I naturally offer love and service, but I have a difficult time accepting help. Yes. So reflect on how you love giving to others, and then reflect that would be impossible if other people refuse to receive your offerings. reflect that the only way you're able to experience the joy of giving is because other people are willing to receive. So then you can receive help from others so that the other person can have that same kind of joy. So by receiving, you are giving the other person a gift, the gift of being able to give. So that's one thing that you can do. So receiving help is actually bringing happiness into the mind of the person who is giving, which would not be there if you refuse their help. So you can see even receiving as an act of generosity. Julie says, are there any suttas that speak on how much meditation the Buddha did daily after being awakened? Okay, Sanata?
The only thing I could think of is something that gives us insight into the Buddha's daily practice. I mean, that he would meditate at night for a certain period. But during the day, I don't know. I mean, there is like people come to visit wherever he's at, and they'll find him either sitting or walking, and he talks about him meditating. But I do remember somewhere, kind of like in an article, Bhikkhu Bodhi, kind of getting all this information and breaking it down. Tell us, well, what the Buddha's daily routine, like teaching, meditating, talking to devas, and going on alms. He kind of broke down once, but it was a long time ago. I don't know, Bhante, do you have any idea of like Buddha's schedule throughout the day?
Well, it's not really said anywhere in the suttas. So we do see a number of suttas which show that the Buddha did continue doing meditation, but there's nothing that gives us a sense as to how much. And it's kind of beside the point. He was already awakened anyway. And this isn't really a question. Let's see. Karma is the result of the interaction between embedded thoughts or embedded sensations with the infinite space filling infinite energy. I have to be honest, that makes absolutely zero sense to me. I really have no idea what this is saying. I think Hari Naidu, you'll need to explain what you're talking about. I don't understand at all. Sud says, if someone develops a mind of loving kindness, but then notes someone is hungry and buys them a ham sandwich out of loving kindness. Now there is no intention of cruelty towards the animal, but he is still buying it. He only has loving kindness in heart. How can this cause negative karma for the person acting with no ill intention in the heart?
It's the questions. I guess this relates to previous conversations that we've been having about eating meat being a participation in a kind of collective harm because the meat industry is so harmful to animals. It's so cruel to animals. So this is a very interesting example of a person, buying a meat product to give to someone. What an act of great kindness to give to someone who's hungry. I mean, again, I guess, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we can reflect on karma as relating to intentionality. So what is the intention in the moment? That's going to have the main sort of ongoing effect. And giving to somebody in need, giving generously, that's a wholesome karma for us. And then this subtlety here of what we choose to give. I feel, the Buddha said if we try to understand the workings of karma, we'll just go crazy. So we don't need to investigate perhaps too deeply because we can't fully know. But we can say, there's in our every breath, we're breathing in organisms that probably die and breathing out organisms, again, that probably die. And every time we eat, we're eating organisms that have had to sacrifice their life force so that we can survive. And so it goes on. So I think there are nuances in this example, and we can appreciate those nuances.
Great. And Karuna says, could you share some thoughts on overcoming the regret/self-aversion that comes from having missed a brief period of formal practice, especially if you're a bit worn out coming out of a busy work week? Bhante?
Yeah, just, self-compassion, we strive, to do our best, but we fall short because external conditions or our own body the way I kind of look at these kind of situations is more like as kind of Bhante was talking, referring to in the previous question, if we would turn this around, right? If someone came up to you, if your friend came up to you and says, I've been working for like so many weeks, so many hours, I've been doing like all of this hard and I have been able to meditate for the whole week. I don't think you would go, well, you're a bad Buddhist, you're not a good meditator. You wouldn't criticize that person. You'd be like, oh, well, you'd be very understanding and compassionate. Well, like, you're so busy, that's why you couldn't. And if you had the chance and the opportunity and the privilege to practice, you would. So just kind of treat yourself like you would treat others, right? And treat others like you would treat yourself. That's the basic Buddhist principle. So sometimes it's a little bit more difficult. For some reason, we're a little bit more critical of ourselves than we are of other people, or we feel that we're not worthy of it. So it's just kind of be your own best friend, Be your own best friend and treat yourself like you would treat your best friend. I always think of my nephew when I fall into these situations. Like, how would I think of my nephew Aiden? Like, how would I, if he came to me with this, or if he was thinking this, how would I interact with him? And it would always come from like forgiveness, non-judgment, compassion, loving kindness. I would never say to him what I say to myself. And that usually gives me enough space to kind of reorientate my thought process and not be so critical and beat myself up.
Great, thank you. And Holly says, I will be going to Thailand with Aya Santusika, Aya Chitananda, and 25 lay people in November. I hope to just go with the flow, visits to 6 monasteries. It will be my first time to go. I hope to be inspired and deepened in my journey of learning what the Buddha taught. What advice do you have for me on this pilgrimage? I do have some advice. First off, I think your hope to be inspired and deepening in your journey of learning what the Buddha taught, that's very lovely, but it's creating the conditions for you to be disappointed. So actually the best thing to do is to go with 0 expectations, because if you expect anything, and this is a general principle for all of life, not just for visiting Thailand, if you expect anything, then there's a chance of disappointment. If you expect nothing, then you will only be pleasantly surprised. So that's the first thing I will say. The second thing I will say is be prepared to be disappointed. So there are a lot of beautiful, inspiring things in Thailand and in Thai Buddhism. There's also some horrifically disappointing things. So the first time I went to Thailand, I went in the company of a bhikkhuni, and I was absolutely horrified at how much disrespect she was shown and how cruelly she was treated, purely for being a female monk. So did we see some beautiful and inspiring moments in Buddhism? Yes, we did. Did we see some absolutely horrific misapplications of Buddhism? Yeah, we saw that as well. So traveling to Thailand in the company of bhikkhunis, you may see some really disgusting treatment, some really awful behavior, which is very sad because that has nothing to do with the Buddha's instructions. It has to do with people's misunderstanding of the Buddha's instructions. So just advance warning. You will probably see some wonderfully inspirational things, but you will probably also see some very disheartening and depressing things. But just remember that those disheartening things are not the teachings of the Buddha. They're just the result of misunderstandings that have crept in over the centuries. So that's my main piece of advice. The other advice I would say is there's a giant Guanyin statue, and I don't remember exactly where it is, but it's about an hour or 2 hours away from Bangkok. Really stunning. I recommend visiting that. Do you know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. It's really huge. It's like 100 meters tall or something. You can go up inside it. It has like mantras playing constantly.
I don't think I've been there.
It's really, really stunning. And the whole place is run by a Theravada bhikkhu. So you'd think it's a Mahayana place, but it's actually a Theravada place.
It's a must.
Yeah.
I hope they go there. I have to tell Aya Santusika and Aya Chitananda about it.
Yeah, it was actually my favorite place that we went to in Thailand. I really, really loved it. Let's see. Jake says, could you please explain what is meant by world systems within the cosmology? Are they to be understood as solar systems, galaxies, or perhaps a whole universe? I do not know the Pali equivalent.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on this? Yeah. Yes. No.
I don't know for sure what world systems refers to. I think it's okay for us to consider all those possibilities and see what resonates for us. The senses of, yes, the wide universe and maybe actually other universes. Buddhist cosmology is amazing. It's very extensive, vast and all-encompassing, And so I think we can just extend the meaning as much as we find helpful.
Yeah, I mean, just to share my thoughts on the matter, first off, I agree with what you're saying. I don't think it's really important to get too hung up on these details, but I have given some thought to this because I like thinking about these things. So first off, the Pali words are usually either chakavala, which is from the word chaka, that means wheel. And the other word that's normally used is loka dhatu. So loka means world, and dhatu usually translated as element or constituent. And it's actually quite a broad word with a wide range of meanings. So first, the imagery of wheel. Well, the solar system is kind of in the shape of a wheel. Like if you see like the sun in the center and like the planets in concentric rings around it, that looks like a wheel. Galaxies are usually also in the shape of a wheel. Again, kind of like these swirling, spirally things, though there's different shapes of galaxies. But then galaxies are also part of galactic clusters, which are also in the shapes of wheels. Then you have galactic superclusters, which are in the shapes of wheels. So the word chakrawala doesn't necessarily give us a good clue of what's going on. So I tend to think probably it's on the scale of either solar systems or galaxies. Some monks think that solar system is too small and that it must be in the scale of galaxies, because one of the clues that we get is it says that once a Buddha arises in a particular world system, then another Buddha will not appear until after the first one's teachings have been completely forgotten. So because it is possible for communication between solar systems to happen, but communication between galaxies is effectively impossible, then one could therefore conclude, well, it can't possibly mean merely solar systems, because if like the closest solar system to ours is only like 4 light years away. So if there was a Buddha there, they could be broadcasting his teachings to us and we would get them within 4 years. So that's too close to our Buddha. So that seems unlikely that world system would mean only solar system. So I tend to think it's probably galaxies or bigger, though I don't know. Have you thought about this at all?
My teacher, Bhante Puniji, would go with galaxy, but also he would say like the Pali and our current system, it's not a perfect matchup.
Yeah. And the other thing also is that in the Buddhist view seems to be that there are effectively infinite parallel universes as well. So then the world system meaning universe is also quite plausible. So let's see what else we've got here. Hari Naidu has some more comments, but I'm still not understanding them. And that's not formed in the phrase of a question anyway. Okay, so it says, Dear Aya, would the same then also apply to driving a car? No ill intention towards little bugs, no intention to destroy the planet, but intention to get from point A to B to do good deeds. Then is the person still explaining to Yama after death why he had to drive a car? Just trying to clarify my understanding of karma. What do you think?
Yeah, very good. Yeah, very interesting, isn't it? Again, what's the intention? The intention is to do good, use the car to get to the place where you're going to do good. Wonderful. I mean, that on the surface is great. And then, if we have the understanding and appreciation of the polluting aspects of driving a car and the bigger picture of, wanting to, burn as little petrol or gas as we can in order to not be contributing any further than we have to climate issues. There are many huge numbers of aspects to every situation. And so I think it's great to think about these things, and it's great to consider, because the reason you're bringing these in, of course, the ham sandwich, the driving of the car, is because we have a sense that there may be something slightly dubious about these things. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a question. So, yeah, it's, very good to go about our lives doing good and being glad about that, and feeling good about our wholesome intentions, and that we're doing our best, as you surely are. And then we're living in a world where there's all sorts of issues and implications of our every act. And sometimes we can consider how we could do things in a less harmful way. So if you could get on your bicycle to go and do good rather than driving the car, that would be great if that was possible. If you could provide a vegetarian sandwich to the beggar, that would be even more wonderful than giving them a meat sandwich, and so on. So the reason these questions come in is because we can always refine and polish our good acts and brighten and purify our karma. There's endless ways to do that. So great to consider these things.
Great, thank you. And Anonymous says, if you help someone and they want to pay you, but you don't want to take their money, you just wanted to be kind, will you be interfering with them making karma? What do you think?
If someone wants to pay you, I mean, you could say no, and if you want to keep paying you, you see this making the person feel uncomfortable, and why not take it? Like, it's a good thing. They're practicing Dhamma and giving. You gave to them, now they want to give to you. There's no reason why you shouldn't take it. You should ask your question, why don't I want to take it? Is it because you feel unworthy? Is it because you feel that you might taint the action that you previously did? Like, kind of like see where this is coming from. But in that moment, I mean, I had this happen once when I went to Mexico and I visited some Catholic nuns, and my cousin's always helping them a lot. But the Catholic nuns were still not doing that well. So then the head nun there offered something to my cousin, and my cousin felt he didn't want to take it because he knows their situation. And then he asked me, what should I do right in front of her? And I was like, if she's offering sincerely, then you should accept sincerely. And he accepted, and then later he was like, well, I don't know, they're not doing good. I was like, you can always come back and give the money back tomorrow. You could do something nice for them later, but that makes them feel good, and it's very sincere. So don't deny someone that opportunity of doing a wholesome action.
Yeah, actually, in the case of the Catholic nuns and that story you just mentioned, another thing is you then make an anonymous donation afterwards. And if possible, higher than what they gave you.
Yeah.
Rick says, today at the food pantry, I had a beautiful time offering loving kindness and help to people who have different religious beliefs, many who would not accept my Buddhist practice. Can you share some examples of how you skillfully interact with people of other faiths? Yes, so this does come up a lot, especially interacting with Christians of various kinds, and especially Catholic monastics. We frequently visit Catholic monasteries and Catholic convents and communicate with them. And actually what tends to work the best is to focus on the aspects of their practice that you can appreciate. So, for example, if they have practices of kindness, of generosity, of virtue of some sort, which is in commonality with Buddhism, and you will find much in common, then appreciate that. And where there's divergences in viewpoints and divergences in practices, well, just set that aside. There's a time and a place to talk about divergences and differences. And there's a time and a place to just appreciate the shared ground of goodness. And most of the time, it's just appreciating that shared ground of goodness. That's what most of the time is appropriate. Okay. And Bhavani asks, can the mind travel to different planets, galaxies, places, etc.? Or is it mind thinking about them staying in the body? Ayubi?
That's great. Mind is almost like sort of out of space, out of place, not relating to place, because it's not a material thing. So it's an interesting consideration. Where is the mind when we're thinking about Mars? Is the mind in the body? It's just very interesting. I don't really know the answer, but it's something you can, give a little bit of time to considering. But more important, to observe the workings of the mind and how restless it is and how much it moves around, and particularly moving into the past or into the future, away from the present moment, and to really focus our energy and attention on trying to, in a way, tame the mind. How do we do that? We can do that with meditation practice. We can pay attention to the body and see where mind is. And we can pay attention to feelings. We can pay attention to the breath and just see how mind relates to this practice. And the benefits of meditation are that we get to watch the mind with the mind and just to see. So rather than directing the mind and kind of speculating about the mind and its workings, we can actually observe without doing anything at all, be a witness to the mind. And when we're witnessing the mind, applying mindfulness, applying wise attention to mind, then the mind can really reveal its true nature to us.
Great. And Julie asks, how transparent should one on the path be about being Buddhist? Part of me wants to not hide it, and part of me is afraid of discrimination or of it affecting my teaching career. Bhante Sanatana.
To the degree that you feel comfortable, express it that way. If you're in a place where your job or maybe even your life is in danger, to kind of, if you share with people that you're a Buddhist or whatever, people get persecuted and discriminated for various reasons. Then you might want to hold back for your own personal safety and your well-being. But at the same time, if you live in a place fortunate enough where you can express yourself, and it's more kind of your fears coming more from like wanting to be liked or wanting to be accepted by others or wanting to be part of the community, then I would explore, why do I need external validation? Why do I need other people's approval? Why do I need other people's permission to freely express myself? And then kind of from there, little by little, start expressing myself more and more and more. But I think I've seen kind of like two extremes that people follow. One is like to completely like be in the closet Buddhist and like hide everything from everyone, and that just makes you feel horrible. You live a horrible life that way. I mean, for whatever reason you're in the closet for, all people who are in the closet don't want to be there. It sucks. Like, it's a horrible place to be, right? So don't do that to yourself if you can. And the other one is kind of like this soapbox, like evangelizing Buddhist, right? Who's like, I'm so proud to be Buddhist and I'm going to tell everyone about the Buddha. It's kind of like CrossFit, right? Like where they just throw CrossFit on everyone, like even if you don't ask about it. So that's the other extreme of the Buddhism, right? Where like it's good for you and you like it so much, but then you kind of like want everyone else to know that how great it is and you want to push it on everyone, and that's all you talk about, and it becomes annoying. You don't talk about anything else. So we want to avoid these two extremes, and then also be very receptive to our environment, right? And kind of find that delicate balance. And it might shift, right? There might be times where you can show more of your Buddhist practice. And then there might be times where you kind of have to pull in. So let's not get into any kind of like fixed mind state about how we should and how we shouldn't, but it should be more of a dynamic response to where we feel comfortable in this moment, and also to our environment around us.
Great. And Spook says, what are your thoughts about the middle way as it relates to the need for basic needs to be met, housing, food, clothes, medicine, as a condition for spiritual awakening? IMB, what do you think?
How the middle way relates to the need for basic needs. Okay, yeah, I'm thinking of the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the first teaching of the Buddha, where he speaks about the middle way between austerity and doing without, and indulgence, or having more than we need, and actually to find the balance between the two. And the monastic life's really helpful for this, because we just have these four requisites: food, medicine, shelter, and clothing, and recognize very easily, we can all recognize that these are the four things we actually need. Everything else is superfluous. And then how much of these we need, this is for us to sort of gauge on a daily basis, to get the right amount and not too much and not too little. I'm particularly thinking about food, because that's a daily practice. The clothing, well, it turns over less frequently. Medicines just when we need them, to ask for what we need, not be afraid to do that, and not to take medicines if we don't need them. And then what's the other one? Shelter. Yeah, that's more long term. But to be very modest about these things, not to be picky or choosy about these things, to be grateful for the most simple standard in these ways. And so the whole monastic life is teaching us to be very grateful for those requisites in whatever form they present themselves. And it's important to make sure that our basic needs are met as much as possible and to recognize what they are. Yeah.
Yep. And we have a question here from Sud. So it says, can you talk about how to skillfully talk about negatives of a person so as to keep in with honesty and response without making the discussion unwholesome? Was hoping to see if the Buddha ever talked about how to criticize someone. Actually, yes, he did. There's a discourse, I don't remember off the top of my head where exactly it is. It's probably in Guttara Nikaya, Book of the Five, since it's a list of 5 things. And the Buddha gives 5 guidelines for how to criticize someone in a wholesome way. And they're about establishing 5 intentions in the mind. The first one is, I will speak truthfully, not untruthfully. So that's the critical one, is to make sure that what you're about to say is actually true. Second, I will speak what is beneficial, not what is unbeneficial. So considering, is it actually going to be helpful, what you're saying? Is it actually going to help the other person be a better person? Is it actually going to improve conditions for the people affected? So you need to make sure it's actually genuinely helpful. And this is helpful in the Buddhist sense, not necessarily in a worldly sense or material sense, but helpful in the sense that it helps people to be happier, to be wiser, to be closer to awakening. Third one is to speak at the right time, not at the wrong time. So carefully considering what the right time and place are for bringing something up. So trying to find a time when the other person is going to be receptive to what you're saying. Sometimes a person is actually open to receiving feedback or criticism or admonishment, but you catch them at a time when it's really not good. They're in a hurry, or they're in a bad mood, or they're sick, or it's a situation which isn't good for them. So maybe they're surrounded by a group of friends or coworkers, and it would be damaging to their reputation if you bring things up in that social context. So considering the right time and place in order to say something, and trying to find the ideal circumstances for admonishment. And that also means reflecting on your own state of mind as well, when you think you are in the best state of mind for bringing something up. The fourth one is, the Buddha says one should speak gently, not harshly. So instead of being like, you idiot, how could you? Instead, you want to say like, so when you were doing this thing the other day, so speaking in a gentle and calm way, not in a harsh or abrasive way. And then the fifth one the Buddha says is to speak with a mind of loving kindness, a mind of metta, not with any kind of aversion inside. So this also means really looking at your mind. And if you see any aversion or negativity or hostility or anger or anything like that present in your mind, then that's not the right time to criticize someone, because that inner hostility or aversion or negativity, that will poison your efforts. And there's a good chance that the other person will feel that underlying aversion and react negatively to it, even if they would not otherwise react negatively to your words. So these 5 criteria make a huge difference in terms of being able to offer admonishment to others. But also a very important thing is that you yourself must train yourself to be very open and receptive to admonishment from others, whether they're following these 5 guidelines or not. There's an interesting story from the canon where a monk is complaining that the other monks won't listen to his criticism, and the Buddha tells him, well, that's because you don't listen to their criticism of you. So this is actually pointing to a basic underlying principle, which is, if you want other people to be receptive to your admonishment, then you need to be receptive to theirs. And actually, this can really change people. Like when somebody comes to you and they're like, and you're just like, oh, thank you for letting me know. I'm really grateful that you're willing to share these things with me. I'll do my best to improve. That often people are like, oh, I wasn't expecting that to go so smoothly. And then that will start to get them reflecting on how they receive admonishment. So that tends to also change people's attitudes. So your own willingness to receive criticism has a huge impact on your ability to give criticism in a wholesome way. Those are a few thoughts. And that's the last question I'm seeing right now. There were some comments earlier, but there's no questions appearing right now. So if no questions appear briefly, then we might go ahead and wrap up for the evening. Okay. Maybe that's it for now. Yeah. Good. Okay. So we appreciate your questions and your contributions to this Dhamma discussion, and we'll go ahead and conclude at this time with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we'll see you all next time.